slightly continue that conversation just for a minute because I have huge respect for the Yankees, and you must be a Yankee. Are you a Mets fan at all? Can you root for the Mets?
Uh, well, hey, they're New York, so of course. But yeah, I grew up about 10 minutes from Yankee Stadium. My father took me there from the time I was 5, and I one memory I have that indelible. In fact, I wrote about it in a poem one time, which is that in those days the Giants were playing in the Polo Grounds across the Harlem River, and we went to an afternoon game at Yankee Stadium, walked across the bridge, and went to a night game at the Polo Grounds. It was, yeah. Uh, so I'm a huge Yankee fan. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And do you hold any affinity for any other teams, or is it just the Yankees as your like heart and soul?
Yeah, I, I'm always impressed by a great player. Ohtani or Mike Trout. I'm certainly in awe of real talent. In terms of following teams, I pretty much only follow the Yankees. Um,
Fair enough.
but yeah. I mean, but I can respect a great player. And no matter where they are, and even more power to them if they're in a small, a market team where they don't get a lot of attention, where they don't get the kind of attention that they deserve.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. One more thing, and I think you'll appreciate this. Your storytelling soul will appreciate this. So my buddy Phil, his name's Phil Green. He has ALS, and last year for ALS Day in the major leagues, we went to the Dodger game because we're Southern California people, and they were playing, as you might know, the Yankees at Dodger Stadium. And so before the game, Phil's on the field. We're all just hanging out, doing all the stuff that goes on there. And Phil gets to sneak off into the tunnel with Garrett Cole and Aaron Judge. And so
wow.
Aaron looks at Phil, and this 100%, all this really happens. Aaron looks at Phil and says, "I'm going to hit you 2 home runs today." And Phil's like, "Thank you," And so we start the game. Aaron Judge did not hit 2 home runs that day. Mookie Betts hit 2 home runs that day. You know what happened the next day? Aaron Judge ran into that fence.
Oh my
I I I put this on Lou and the Babe, going, "Hey, hey,
yeah.
big fella, this is
Don't brag.
don't, don't brag." And you
Yeah,
let Mookie do it. You didn't
yeah,
do it
yeah,
too. Oh
yeah,
man,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's
Wow.
it really happened, and it's a crazy thing. Baseball's full of
Yeah,
these crazy
yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm not trying to hate on the Yankees. I think they're fantastic, but
Yeah. Well, like any organization, they have their problems, but it seems that these days that the Dodgers have become what the Yankees were. I mean, they spend without limit. They go, they're aggressive. They go after top players. Certainly, this last, they've done that for the last, half dozen years anyway.
yeah,
But this last season, I mean, they outdid themselves, and that's
yeah,
what the Yankees used to do. The Yankees are, I don't know, they made some bad choices, and they put together some bad teams in recent years. So it's a little disappointing. And as a New Yorker, where it's no, you got to produce all the time. No, we're not waiting three seasons or two
yeah,
seasons. No, we don't have that kind of we don't have that kind of forbearance. We want results now. You're
yeah.
playing in New York. You gotta perform. And
Championship or nothing.
last season was just a disaster. I mean, most of us just gave up halfway through, and it was just so disappointing.
Yeah.
But hey, you can't have everything.
Yeah, you guys have had a lot of good fortune, right? And so you have to be able to, I follow the Dodgers. They're probably the team I watch the most just because of where I live and everything. But when they lose, I'm like, that they lost, because you reach a certain point where you're like, they're going to lose a certain amount of games. Sometimes they're going to get one that they shouldn't have. Sometimes they're going to lose one they should have
Right, right.
had. And these things work themselves out. Let's talk about writing books. So
Sure.
a lot of people, so we have a lot of authors on the show, and a lot of people are always, like, "Hey, Pete, write a book," or, "Do you know anyone who could coach me through writing a book?" And there are some things that you need to know. I would say, and this is just me talking to a lot of you all. Um, the biggest thing is that when you write a book, you have to realize you're going to have to be, at least initially in your first part of your career, salesman or saleswoman of the year for your book every year running. Like there's no one else who's going to outwork you on selling your book. And if you're not prepared to do that, that's a different kind of book you're going to write.
Yeah, and it's gotten tougher and tougher because there are more books now being produced than ever. I mean, the amount of, I mean, just the numbers are staggering on how many books are produced. And, we hear so often, oh, people aren't reading anymore. Well, somebody must be reading because there are so many books being produced, and somebody's got to be reading them. Yes, and that's a part that most writers, most people in the arts, don't shine at and don't like to do. Um, we're much more comfortable behind the scenes, working on the craft than being out there and pitching things. But unless you do some kind of publicity, how do you? There's no other way of standing out among in the crowd. And you think about movies. I mean, where half the budget, I think it's something like half the budget
Yeah.
is for advertising.
Yeah.
I mean, that tells you, what the experts in the arts think about the power of advertising and then the necessity for it. And with books, certainly that equation does not exist. But so it's a very different thing. And yeah, I mean, it's a different part of the brain. It's a different, I grew up Catholic, so the whole idea was, pride was a sin. You don't brag about yourself. You don't boast about yourself. You don't, you don't call unnecessary attention to yourself. So, so I've got that baggage too, but, and also I, I'm outgoing, but I'm not really, a self promoter,
Yeah. 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 And when you do self promote, it's easy to become the thing you don't want to be. Like when we first started the show, I had to talk about the show because if I didn't, who else was going to do it? And so that was all I talked about. And you're like, oh my God, I must have been insufferable. And so you have to find that balance of when am I working, when am I not, but I'm always working, and that has got to be tough as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, fortunately, there are a lot of indirect ways that I can be in front of people, which because I teach, so I have a continual stream of people who want to learn how to write who come to me. So I don't really have to do anything really direct in terms of that. They're just hey, if they like what I'm saying, they may pick up a book of mine and read it. So that's helpful too.
Yeah, yeah. What are the things about being a writer, comedian, actor? You go to a party. I love to ask this question. When you go to a party, what do you say that you do? I mean, it's obvious you're a writer, right? But if you're just getting going, when do you get to say it? And then how do you quantify or qualify what kind of writer you are? Like if you make $100,000 a year writing manuals, you're a writer, right? It's not terribly sexy, but you know what? Like I'm a writer. I write manuals, and I make a very good living doing it. So when do you get to say, I'm a writer when you go to cocktail parties?
That's a good question. I probably when you have had at least one thing of yours published by someone other than yourself.
Oh, okay.
But even if even if you, I mean, technically you are a writer. Even if you self-publish everything. Walt Whitman, one of our greatest poets. He self-published. It wasn't there was no stigma to it. I mean, he did, and look, and so technically anybody who writes is a writer. I guess maybe the distinctions you can make are you a professional writer? Do you do it for your living?
Right.
And I mean, I call myself a writer early on because I wrote 5-6 hours every single day, including Sunday, in addition to whatever teaching job I had at the time. So, I mean, I don't think I was exaggerating by saying I was a writer. Yeah, and then once I started getting published, then I felt even more, confident, in saying it. And then I do it full time. So.
Have you moved past being a writer, though? I mean, you've done so many things. I mean, obviously, look, you write a book, written a lot of books, you teach writing, all that kind of thing. But are you a teacher more than a writer? Well, have you moved out of being, oh, I'm a writer? What do you say when you go to a party?
Yeah, that's what I say. I'm a
Yeah,
writer. I write
yeah,
fiction,
yeah.
and um, I don't think you ever move out of that. It's just too much a part of my life. In fact, even the teaching, because I teach writing, um, it's all part of the same. It's all part of the same entity. I mean, it's what I think of as my life. I don't even think of it as work. It's this. I just get up and I do it. I write during the day and then I teach at night. It's I can't conceive of a day without not doing that. So it's so ingrained, it's so much a part of my existence that it's not even something that I think of as separate, from. It's just who I am,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't think that that'll ever go away. I mean, because each time you write a new book, you have a new set of challenges, and you learn something about writing from each book that you write. And
When
the good
you
thing, one thing that's exciting about it is that, you know, you never learn everything. So that it's continually a learning process, which is exciting to me. It's like every semester you have a new group of students or a new group of hearts and minds to learn about. It's always exciting.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great point. And I was going to ask you, when you think about your body of work, is there is there a sentence, a paragraph, a passage, a page, a chapter that stands out and you're like, this is the peak of what I can create? Have Do you have any idea what that is, or how do you track your growth?
Um, I guess I track my growth. Uh, One of the easier ways of tracking growth is by um, you're thinking about your style and how your writing style may have evolved over time. And I think for me, with this new novel, Night and Its Longings, which just came out on Tuesday, I think I've tightened my style to a point where I think it serves the story um, uh, by reinforcing the rhythm and the cadence and the pace of the story. Uh, by that, I don't mean to sound esoteric with that. It's just that I've tightened the language to the point where um,
Mm,
it mirrors it has the same urgency and propulsion that my main character Jake has in investigating this woman whom he loves, who has disappeared. Let me just give you just a brief example of what I mean
yeah.
by tightening the style. So here's the opening of uh, chapter 40. Guilt is a form of justice. It needs no jury to convict, no locked cell. Simply a man alone, face to face with an act he can't undo. Um, so I try to really focus in on what's driving my main character Jake and what he's feeling, and he's just accidental and well not through no fault of his own really. He's someone that he was investigating is killed, and he just feels a responsibility for that having happened, even though that was not, of course, his intention that would happen. But as a result of talking to him, he's being killed by a corrupt policeman. Um, I would say um, my style has gotten tighter and more focused over time, and
Mm.
I need fewer words to get the feeling and create the atmosphere of my scenes.
Love it. I want to get right back to that, but you just pulled out the part of chapter 40. So
Yeah.
why do you know that? Is that just prep for doing these shows, or why does that line hold its spot?
No, because one of the other shows that I was interviewed on uh, read that back to me, because it was a section that he was really moved by.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought, hey, if I ever need it, I'll use that. And when you no, and this is the first time I've used it. I mean, but when you said, that, I thought, well, hey,
Yeah.
I'll let him see chapter 40.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But no, yeah. So he pointed it out to me. But it's that kind of thing where, we're really zeroing in on what the character's feeling, and then of course we move into what the character is doing right after that.
Yeah.
But what he's doing is a result of what he's feeling.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. There's some truths right in writing, and when you are a writer for as long as you have, when you teach for as long, and I would venture that you might have learned more about writing from teaching than the doing part. But I'll leave you to tell me that. There are axioms like Hemingway's like one true sentence. That's how you start the thing, right? And then fellow New Yorker John Steinbeck, man, that guy he could describe something with two words that had never been put together before, and it just sticks with you. Like I think about his book about traveling around the nation. He talks about a star rattled sky or flypaper youth. And you're just like, you know what? I don't know what that is, but I know exactly what he's talking about.
Right,
And the other thing, I still know what it looks like when Tom Joad cleans behind the ears of his kids because of the way he described that. And he uses like two words all the time and just writes a chapter in two words. It's amazing.
Yeah. And the need for that has grown, of course, exponentially as we've moved from, mid 20th century to or early 20th early to mid 20th century to our present day, where where attention spans are shorter and where um, uh, uh, film has so dictated what we're accustomed to. In other words, you think of a film, if a scene goes on a minute or two in a film, that's a long scene. That's a long
Mhm.
scene. But if you stop it when you're watching, how many times the camera changes, how brief scenes are for the most part. So that's what you were, saying about Steinbeck. Also true of Hemingway. They were kind of ahead of their time in terms of streamlining their prose so that it was hard hitting emotionally, but not verbose. And I think that's certainly something that I um, was interested in honing in my own craft. And
Right.
I feel in this book I've done it in a way that really adds to the experience of reading the story.
Let's put the book up here on the screen, Night and Its Longings, the link right down below. You all know what I always say. Buy two, do a buddy read. That's the best way to support authors. And there it is right there. It's good. I was reading it, and like your previous show, there were passages in there where I thought, and to be fair, I was looking at your writing because of your pedigree. And I'm like, I really want to see well-crafted books because I read a lot of books and I interview about a lot of books, and not all of them are well crafted. Doesn't mean they're not good, but the economy, the efficiency, the elegance in your writing, and I should say eloquence as well. It's all there, and it's fantastic. And so you don't need me to congratulate you on that, but
But I
congratulations.
appreciate
That's a
that. Yeah,
fantastic
no,
book. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, no, what you're saying is what, of course, every writer really wants to hear, that that somehow they made a connection to the reader. So it's
yeah,
not like me sitting alone in my room and coming up with all the stuff, but that now it's time. Okay, does it speak to anybody else in this world? And you had mentioned earlier about the effect of teaching and on the writing, and
right.
absolutely. I got my PhD in literature from NYU, and then like the next weekend, I got a job interview and a job. I got the job interview was on Friday. I started teaching that Monday because there was a woman a professor had gotten pregnant. They needed somebody in a hurry. So I come in Monday morning. I'm teaching a section of what they call freshman English. When I was in college, we didn't even have freshman English. We just went right to a literature course, and so I had to figure out. I had to figure out how to teach writing. And then I was teaching literature, creative writing classes. And I said, you've read hundreds of books, but you have to figure out how to explain this to somebody who's trying to write. So I had to articulate what had not been articulated in me before, about what makes a story. Well, what is the essence of a story?
Yeah.
And so, yes, absolutely, it had a big influence on my writing, because it taught me, okay, this is what a story is. Stripped down to its essence. This is what a story is. And and uh, and I really think that enabled me to hone my craft enough so that I would get published. Finally, it took me 6 years. It took me 6 years of writing, um, after I graduated from after I graduated with my PhD. I wrote for 6 years before my first story got published.
Do you have a genre of writing? And we'll talk about entertainment writing. Leave all the technical and professional writing aside. Is there something that you're like, man, I wish I could write screenplays, teleplays, whatever it's going to be, that, but it's just not going to be your thing. I mean, whatever things you have left to do, there's less in the front of you than there is behind you, right? Like we're both like past halfway. So is there some kind of thing where you wish I could write words like so and so in that genre or in that style or thing?
Yeah, well, I do write plays also. So that's another area that I work in, and it's different because it's communal. I mean, once writing the play is, yourself, but then when you're putting it on, you're working with actors and directors and stage people and all that. So I do that as well. But to answer your question in the simplest way, one thing I always wished I could do more of, and better, is write comedy,
Mm,
or to have more comedy, or yeah, to use more comedy, even in the serious, in the more serious fiction, to work more comedy. I still struggle with that. I mean, I watch comics, I read whatever comic
yeah,
prose I can find, but one thing I realized is you can't say to yourself, I'm going to sit down and write something funny. No, that's the wrong approach. And that's what I was doing for a while. You got to come up with a funny idea and just write. No, that's not the way to do it. Maybe that's the way to write a skit for TV, for SNL or something like that. But it's not the way to write a book. You have to, have a subject that you really are interested in, and usually it would be a serious subject for me. But that you have to be able to then find the humor within that, and it's a very different approach, and I think you get a much better product doing the latter than the former. So that's one area that I have in the back of my mind always. Okay, how can I add humor? How can I add humor to this in a way that doesn't distract from the serious, point that I'm making? Well,
yeah,
what Shakespeare did in those days was, he had the serious part, then he had we switched to the guards outside the castle, and they're trading dirty jokes. So there
right,
was, it was very separate. Hamlet, deciding whether to kill his father or his stepfather, and then you had the guards, who are joking around. But nowadays, of course, we intertwine the two, and sometimes we can't separate comedy from tragedy, what we call dark comedy, where they're so they're intertwined. Something is both funny and sad, or
yeah.
uh, heartbreaking at the same time.
Another great writer, Allie Willis, and she's left us, but boy, she could write a song. She wrote September and all kinds of Boogie Wonderland, with Earth, Wind, and Fire. But she wrote songs for everybody. She wrote the theme song to the show Friends. I mean, this
Oh, wow.
lady could do anything.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so she was a true artist, like an artist. Her house is just this crazy mess of things, and she was an art director for videos. This is a lady not bound by convention at all. And she was saying she's like, writing a song easier than writing a musical, because in songs you can use near rhymes and not even close to near rhymes and they'll work. But in a musical, she realized you had to land on the right word, and it had to be a rhyme. They didn't have the kind of same looseness for that. And these are things that, and look, maybe someone else breaks that rule, but for Allie, that's how she had to write these things professionally. And you think about all of these little tools that are in your bag that you don't even know you need those tools to write in this style or in this job or in that thing. It really is kind of endless. And then someone else's grinder, you might grab that thing and be like, I don't know how to work this damn thing. And you throw it away and you find your own new way of doing it.
Yeah. No, it's true. She sounds great, and sounds like she accomplished a lot.
Hall of Fame songwriter,
Yeah.
And when you see her list of work, we were at her house interviewing her. Her house is full of stuff, just full of stuff. I mean, I can't even tell you how many things in her house. It's so busy and full of stuff that behind on her wall, all gold platinum records, must be like 30 of them,
Wow.
And so you realize the power of her command on harmony and melody, but also nailing those words at the right cadence to make people shake their asses and sing along. That is a very distinct talent to be able to blend all that together and make something that is still iconic every time you hear it. Like a book, you're not going to read a book as many times as you hear September from Earth, Wind and Fire.
Right. Yeah, well, I'm sure she worked hard at it, and we most of the time don't see the sweat, the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it. We see the finished product and we think, oh, wow. But that person really, had to dig down and work hard and long to get there.
Yeah.
And that's the way I think of writing when I tell my students, think of it as a lifelong commitment. If, you really want to write, you think of it as, you're in it for the long haul. And, you wouldn't expect to become a professional tennis player in a year. No,
Right.
They start when they're 3 and their parents are hitting them balls, and maybe by the time they're 16 or 17 or 18 they're pro, but it takes a while. It takes time, and the thing is that what I find is that many people just give up before they put in the time. They give up too soon.
How long does it take to really feel like you've mastered the language to the point where in your style, in your genre, that you're able to really command it? Like what's an average? What's a rule of thumb for that?
I don't know. It's really hard to say, and it's probably different for everybody. It just the more you write, the more your writing evolves. For Night and Its Longings, it took me 4 years to write that. My first book, Catholic Boys, took me 10 years to write. So I'm kind of getting down. I'm whittling down the time. But what I want to point out with that is that we see a finished product and we think, oh, it was innate. It was innate. It was, the person was just born with talents. No, that's sweat. That's sweat. That's revision. It's like, they say about movies that, a movie is made in the editing room and it's true with novels too. I mean, you get a first draft down. Maybe so for Night and Its Longings, it took me what did it take? It took me maybe a year, or less than a year to get the first draft down. But then over the next 3 years, I kept rewriting it and showing it, I took a class in novel writing at Syracuse University, which really helped a lot. I got feedback from the professor from the class, and I just kept rewriting it until I thought, okay, now it's as near perfect as I can possibly make it. There's nothing more I can do to make this. Either I've succeeded or I failed, but that's it. I can't do any more.
Right.
So it's just. It's hard to say, and again, I started writing. I started writing when I was 8 or 9. I would write cowboy stories and baseball stories. Those were my two.
I love it.
Yeah. I didn't know enough about love to write love stories until later, but cowboy stories, baseball stories, and I wrote mystery stories. And I grew up. Early part of my life listening to the radio, and and there were a lot of mystery shows on the radio, like
Sure.
Shadow, Inner Sanctum, the Green Hornet, so forth and so on. So I think that was really good training because you had to visualize everything. I mean, all you heard was a creaking door, or you heard footsteps, and you had to create the whole scene and you heard people speaking, but you didn't see them. You had to like draw, come up with a face that a body that went with that voice, and very different than growing up on watching TV and film, where everything is there in front of you. All you have to do is pay attention, basically, to the words and try to understand what the character is thinking. But so much is shown to you. There's not as much visualization. Now, I think both. I mean, I'm a big movie lover.
Yeah.
I think both you can learn from both forms, and both forms are very valid. Um, it's just that in what I found was that training in having to visualize really helped my style in terms of I try to have a very visual style so that when the reader is reading it, there's a movie passing through the reader's head.
Yeah.
So this is all by way of addressing your point about how long does it take to come up with a voice or to come up with a style. So
Yeah.
I think there's so many things that work into it. So we want to read a lot, we want to see movies, we want to experience as much as we can, and we want to
Yeah.
know ourselves as well as we can, and all of those things, and know the world. All of those things, you can't separate. They're all part of the inflow, out of which you bring something out, as a writer.
We have Philip here on the show. His book right here, Night and Its Longings. There's all kinds of fun in this thing. There's boats and islands and all kinds of things. I wanted to make sure everybody went out and got this book. And the link, I'm going to put it right down below here. Let me get Dickie's comment out of the way here for a second. Boom. There's the link down below right there. You can look in the remarks and you can get that book from the Amazon or wherever you get books. It's going to be available everywhere. You're talking about teaching young writers, and I guess so. I took creative writing a lot. It's an easy way to get an A in English because participation is pretty high on those kind of things.
Right.
And it's like, hey, the kid's writing stories, give them an A. But
Right.
when you are doing that, it's kind of tropey, but like I see great things in your kid, and you're really hard on that student, and then you got the kid. It's like too scared, too embarrassed, and you're easier on them. But how do you teach and train and inspire a young writer? And then how do you look? I know you're professional, so it's not a problem for you. But when you have, I don't know however many kids you have in your classroom, if it's more than 15, how do you read and like focus on that reading and then determine like how do I improve this kid? What's an A in a writing class like that?
Yeah. Well, I always hated giving grades because which I had to do it when
Right.
I was teaching university, um, uh, because it's ultimately inaccurate and meaningless, except
Right.
that the person has to graduate, right, and have enough
Right.
credits. So I much prefer at Gotham, where I have, yes, 14 students generally in a class, and there's no grades. They're there because they want to learn how to get stuff down and write.
Right.
Um, so I to answer your question, I address I read each student's work and address it specifically. And sometimes it's overlapping. Similar things need to be done. Okay, you need to show us the background more. I can't see where this
Mhm.
is taking place, or this is confusing. So there are a lot of common elements that all the students can benefit from hearing about. But basically, whatever you might want to try to add some dialogue to the scene because it will give us another insight into the character, or it might move the scene along at a better pace. It's all geared toward each individual student and each piece that they write, and I guess it's just. It becomes second nature to me now when I first started, I had to struggle more to figure out, okay, what is the right thing to say to this person, and what is the thing to take them up to the next step. But that was always my guide. Okay, so you're here. Let me get you up a step. Okay, then when we get to that step, let's go up another step. If you give students too much at one time, it's overwhelming, and you don't want to do that. So I usually try to take the most salient part of what I think they need. Okay, they really need to improve their sentence structure, or their language, or their description of character. And then and start with that. And once I see an improvement in that, then I can move to a secondary point, and third, tertiary point, and so forth. But yeah, but also that's what's exciting about it, is that every time I read something, a piece by somebody else, it's a challenge, and it's interesting. Okay, what's the best thing I can say to help this person? So I like that mental challenge as well. For me, I'm coaching a woman actually who lives on the coast. I'm doing it online through Gotham. She's taking private lessons, and we work 2 hours a week. And so she's written something. She reads it, and we discuss it. I make some suggestions, and but at the end of those 2 hours, I'm exhilarated. I mean, I really, it's like, I just like ran, 10 miles, or, flagged down 20 balls in the outfield. I really like the involvement, the engagement, because, because I think the mind is something we have to continually exercise. We hear a lot about, exercise the body, you got to move, you got to walk 10,000 steps, whatever it happens to be. But we got to do that with the mind too. And the more you do that, the more thrilling the process is, and the more you want to read and learn and understand.
This book is a little over 200 pages, so I'm guessing 50,000 or so words. I'm just guessing.
Good guess. I think it was 54,000, something like 53,000 words. Yeah. Yeah, so it's on the slight side in terms of, a lot of novels I see 450 pages. My feeling is if I can't tell a story in 250 pages, I'm doing something wrong. But that's just that's all my own ethic. I like to read books I don't like to read 700-page books. I mean, it'll take me forever, and then I won't remember, what happened, 3 weeks ago when I was reading it on the subway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you're right all the time, and so 500 words a day is easy pace for you. Why does it take so damn long? When you write a book and it takes years, like what is going into the book? Because you can write this thing on 100 days at 500, 500, words a day kind of thing. So what goes into the book that we don't see? Because obviously, look, you're efficient, you're elegant, you've got tons of experience. You're saying it takes years. So help us understand what that gap looks like between functional and then art in the writing of it.
Yeah, because when I say, it took 4 years to write that book, it does not mean that for 4 straight years, every day I was working on that book. So I would write a draft of it. Then what I find is, after you have a draft, you need to get a separation from it. So what I try to do is then work on something else for a while, maybe a couple of months, whatever. And then I go back to the draft and I see it with clearer eyes. There's something about the time and working on something else that gives you perspective on your own work that you don't have if you just try to do, okay, I'm going to get this whole thing finished in a year and a half, and boom, that's it. No, that never worked for me. So, when you're young, you want to rush things. You want to get this off, and get it published. It's better if you just take the time to do a draft, work on something else, come back to the draft, do another draft, work on something else, come back to the second draft, do a third draft, and so forth. Because in between those times, you're getting a better perspective. That is, you can see the strengths and the weaknesses, and you've also learned more. I mean, you've lived more. There's more experience. There are more things that you've taken in that you can choose from to put into the book. Because, and again, to come back to the point I made earlier about things coming in stages, I don't think it's art, any of the art forms, it comes fully packaged, and neat, and you just have to do it. No, it doesn't work that way. It's an evolution, and that evolution is necessary, and you just take parts and keep adding parts. It's like a 16 track, recording. Everything is, everybody isn't in the same room, singing, playing saxophone and drums. No. We laid down the saxophone riff, and then we put maybe a background vocal, and maybe then we put in the drums. It's all it comes in parts rather than as a complete whole. And I think that with the people that give up on their writing, I think that they get frustrated with that. But I think that's the process that it's necessary. As one editor once said to me, it takes 9 months to make a baby. And it's true. I mean, it takes a certain amount of time, and just let that time happen.
Yeah. No, that's great. So I fancy myself a bit of a writer. I wouldn't say I'm a writer, but I write things. And there's a couple of truths that I've learned. And again, you have to have enough age to smash your ego back and allow yourself to be fallible. So one, what I think I've written is brilliant, and then I go back and read it, and I'm like, the essence of brilliance is in there, but you got some work to do, kid. Two, I write like a dick, like I'm an asshole. I just come straight at things, and I'm very, very rough on the reader. And then the other thing, I'm wiping out all like typos and passive voice. Like that's stuff I expect to have to fix because that's just how I write. But the third thing is I struggle with smooth. Like there'll be when I go back and read, like a year later, and I'm like, oh, that is so rough and court. Like it's like a branch sticking out of my tree going sideways, and I'm like, why didn't I just write down the word, anthrax right there, and it would have been putty on that super rough spot. And I just do not know how to defeat all that stuff other than practice and time and patience and being a little more deliberate and maybe letting my pieces sit for even a week, because every time I come back, there's things I'd want to change about every single thing I've ever written.
Yeah, and the advice one writer gave to me, and it was good advice. She said, keep revising until you finally read it and you don't feel there's anything else that you want to do. But I think that's your process, and that's fine, and I don't think it's so dissimilar from from the rest of the writing community. You go back to it, and no, this could be better. I need this, or I don't need that, and you keep doing that until you get to the point where, all right, there's nothing. I can't think of anything else I really need to do. I think is what it is. And then you test it out with a few people, and often they will say, well, you could do this, or this needs a little work, and you get a little feedback to help you. But that's all part of the process, all part of the evolution. And so I think you're doing it the right way. I mean, there's no, people have glamorous ideas of what writers do, and it's not so much glamorous. It's just being there, showing up, and paying attention, and not quitting until you got it to a point where you think it's decent. It's not magic. I don't think it's magic. I mean, I think what's magic is the fact that we have these brains and these ideas come to us, and we're able to process experience in the world and then turn that into something that's a reflection of the way we see things. That's kind of like magical process, but otherwise it's just blood, sweat, and tears.
This is the book Night and Its Longings by buddy Phil. He wrote this thing. There's the link down below. I appreciate you guys. If you buy it, buy two so you can support him and do the work of reading it and enjoying it. Hey, so when you write a book, you must get inspired by something. It sounds like you're kind of like me, where you have several projects going on at once. how does a project survive that process and make it through to a book? Because I would imagine you've not written more books than you've actually written, because some ideas are like, that's just gone, when you wipe it off. And then what is next?
Yeah. Well, I had I wrote, I think, 6 novels before the first one got published. Where I said, okay,
Right.
now I'm ready.
Yeah.
The others were kind of training,
Mhm.
summer camp, or, you know, uh, spring training. So that was, uh, uh, that there was just a lot of training until I felt, okay, yeah, now this seems to be on a publishable level. And then once
Mhm.
that happened, I felt more confident. Okay, if I can do it once, I can do it again. What's in terms of what's next? I did write a draft in the last 6 months of a new novel, and I'm not sure. It's definitely not. It definitely needs work, and I'm not sure yet even exactly what it needs. So I put it aside for a while. Been working on a play, and then I have to go back and kind of dig into it and see what's next. But I hope I can keep writing until I can't open my eyes anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm writing a play. I've never actually finished a play before, but it is beyond the limit of my capability to put the story together that I want to put together. I'm not saying that I can't do it, but where I'm at skill wise to where I need to be to put this whole thing together, I have not cracked the code on that. So I've done a lot of, look, I've done a lot of work on it, but there's zero work to show for it. So the concept is good and the storyline, I've got that all figured out, but how I put it together, I can't I can't write in that genre yet. I want to. And even if I write one screenplay, one teleplay, one play, that'll be great. But I don't know that I'll. It's fun to play with, but it's hard enough to do that it's like 7 projects down the list, and so I'll be like, I'll skip that one today. And it's really easy to skip it because it's challenging for me.
What about taking a workshop, getting in
Oh, yeah,
a
yeah,
writers group? Because that may help. That may bring you to another point where you getting feedback, and you have an audience, and you can. Not that everybody's feedback is going to be helpful. It won't,
right,
but
right,
some of it may be. And at the very least, you get a general sense of, okay, this part seems to be working pretty well. This part less well. Um, so I'm a big believer. I still take classes. I mean,
mm,
um, I took classes all my life, and which is the irony is I never wanted to go to school. I went to first grade when I was 4, and as soon as my father would drop me off, as soon as he left, I'd go out the other door. Uh, Finally, they had to take me out of school because and start me the next year. But the irony, of course, is that I spent my whole life in the classroom, literally as
yeah,
a teacher, but also as a student, and I still take classes. So I think I'm a big believer in having a workshop that
mm,
you're a part of, and where you can share work and listen to other people's work, and listen to their struggles, and it's helpful on a lot of in a lot of ways. Not it just is supportive, um, but it also helps you with the craft of writing as well. So that's what I would suggest. If you can't see, if there's a theater company that has a workshop attached to it, or there are definitely online things that you can do for
yeah.
sure.
I mean, I don't know how many, but there must be thousands of community colleges, and I bet they have a bunch of people
Yeah.
that run workshops at them, or taking, it's possible to take your class online. It's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. The I what I do. Uh, I had a dry period during the
Mhm.
pandemic. I had to get back, into the world afterwards, and I went back to an acting school that I had been to throughout my career. I would take classes. Mostly I would take writing classes, but I did take some acting classes. But I went back in and I started taking acting classes to help myself get back into writing. And it took a year. It took 1 year, but but uh, but ideas started to come back.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah. So even look at see if there's there's an acting school, and um, they should have playwriting workshops there. But even if you went in as an actor, just um, I believe it will help your writing as well, your
Yeah.
playwriting
Yeah.
as well, because
There's
yeah. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say there are well springs too of inspiration. You talked about that. My buddy Jeff wrote this screenwriting book. Every time I read this book, he's done such a master work, and I'm plugging it. Jeff Calhoun's book.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
read
yeah.
it, and I'm inspired, because he makes it so accessible. The whole what seems like an impossible process. So I read this thing. You can see it's kind of beat up. I read it all the time, but also, and this will be weird, but the movie is it Perfect World, the Kevin Costner's movie when he breaks out of jail. If I watch that movie, I get inspired to write. So if I ever like, oh man, I need a spark, I'll watch that movie, and I'm like, sure enough, worked again. And then I'll I don't know why, but that movie makes me want to write stuff. So do you have
Well,
things like that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's something in it that's personal to you. Maybe you haven't identified what that connection is. There's something
Yeah.
there that's close to your life and close to your. Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm a big believer in rereading books that I like and in rewatching movies. I watched The Fabulous Baker Boys. I watched it every night for a week
Wow.
on
Yeah.
demand. But I'll do that on a regular basis. The Great Gatsby, I read it once every year because
Mhm.
his prose is so crystalline, and it's such a it's such a beautifully written book. Not a bad sentence in that book. I'll reread it every year. So I'm a big believer in what you're describing as sources of information, of inspiration, yes, go to the things that inspire you, and
Yeah.
and try to figure out how the writer did what is making you feel something. You
Yeah.
exactly how what are the words, what are the actions, what are the descriptions, um, what is it that is engaging you. Try to identify what that is, because if you do identify with it, it's something you've learned about yourself, and it will definitely translate into your writing in some way.
That's great.
In some way.
That's great. That's fantastic. Every year, I listen to Game One, 1988 World Series, and it's just a master class in drama. Obviously, there's the big twist at the end, but Vin Scully and Joe Garagiola are amazing in that entire thing. They do this dance. It's an amazing thing. And again, I get inspired by it, and I'll do some work while I'm doing it. I watch it like I'd watch a baseball game. But you hear words. Sometimes you hear something new for the first time, even though you've heard it. I don't know. Maybe I heard that thing 35 times in my life.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it is amazing what's in there.
Yeah, yeah. You get into the depth, the nuances, and the subtleties that we missed the first time around, because the first time around we're just trying to figure out what's going on and what's
Yeah.
happening and how is it going to end.
Yeah.
But once you know all that, then you can actually pick it apart and say, this is how this is how the writer made this work.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then it's something that you're going to be able to use as a writer as well.
How can you not love this? Night and its longings. Here it is. This is Philip's latest book. Anything on Amazon. I'll put the link up here. Get out of the way, Dickie. You're in my way. Let me get your quote off of here. Boom. There it is. There's the link down below. Just man, it's great. I love talking to people that know how to use words to their advantage, and it's wonderful to get a chance to know you. What do you want to say before we wrap this whole thing up?
Well, and I don't know if I have said this before on the show, but I'm happy, to answer questions about writing. If any of your listeners have questions that they want to ask, my website is just my name, Philip Cioffari, Philip with one L, CIOF as in Frank, F as in Frank, ARI.com, and and you can contact me through there. And if you have questions, believe me, I'm happy to answer. I'm really happy to help other writers, and I really want to help other people learn, how to express themselves in writing. And so any of your listeners, feel free to contact me, and I'll be glad to answer questions if I can.
Yeah. That's great. I'm going to put the link up. There's the website right there. And one more quote from Dickie. And I really appreciate you so much for coming on the show. It's always fun to get to do this, but I love talking to folks that have a passion for the thing that they do and then want to help other people do it. I just think that you're wonderful, and I'm excited. And so far, what I've gotten through out of the book, and I'm just past halfway, it's wonderful. And you can see it. And like you said, it's like watching a movie in your head.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And believe me, it's like, what's your legacy? What do you leave behind you? And for me, it's my books, and I don't have children, so it's my books and my students,
Yeah.
people that I can help. So those are the two areas of my life that are most satisfying to me. And I'm always willing to help out when I can.
I'm going to run the credits. Stay there. I'll say goodbye to you when I come back. Everybody else, talk to you later.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.